Okay, hello. My name is Pham. I'm a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University working with Feras and Pham. Today we present our work on robust resource bounds with static analysis and Bayesian inference. We study resource analysis where the goal is to infer a worst-case bound of the cost of a program as a function of inputs. The user first applies a program, say the function quicksort, with input x, and also specifies a resource metric of interest, such as execution time, memory, and energy. Taking these as inputs, automatic resource analysis returns a worst-case cost bound, such as 1 plus 2 times the input size x. Resource analysis has many applications. In computer security, it can be used to detect algorithmic complexity attacks by inferring worst-case resource usage and worst-case inputs of programs. Another application is to estimate the job size for job scheduling in cloud computing, where the cloud service provider wants to avoid both under-provisioning and over-provisioning of resources. Other applications include complexity analysis in the static analysis tool Infer, which is used at Meta/Facebook, and also the worst-case execution time analysis for safety-critical embedded systems. There are two approaches to automatic resource analysis: static analysis and data-driven analysis. Static analysis analyzes the source code. It is sound, that is, any result is guaranteed to be a valid worst-case bound. But it is incomplete, that is, it cannot handle all programs. Meanwhile, data-driven analysis analyzes runtime data. It always returns some inference result, but it offers no soundness guarantee. Our contribution in this work is to integrate static analysis and data-driven analysis into a single framework called hybrid resource analysis to combine their complementary strengths and mitigate their respective weaknesses. In hybrid resource analysis, the user specifies which part of the source code should be analyzed by data-driven or static analysis. For example, the user may choose to run data-driven analysis on the helper function g on the slide because it cannot be handled by static analysis. We then perform these analyses on their respective code fragments and combine the inference results into an overall cost bound. Now that we have motivated the hybrid resource analysis, I will next review the state-of-the-art resource analysis, specifically static analysis and optimization-based data-driven analysis. In static analysis, we examine the source code, construct constraints defining the worst-case behavior, and solve them. Many static analysis techniques have been developed in the literature, including those based on type systems, such as AARA by Jan Hoffmann, Martin Hoffmann, Stefan Jost, and their colleagues. Also recurrence relations, such as Costa by Elvira Albert and her colleagues. And finally, ranking functions, such as approve and code by Eugen Giesel and his colleagues. An advantage of static analysis is that it offers a soundness guarantee, but a disadvantage is that it is incomplete due to the understandability of resource analysis in general for a Turing-complete language. Also, rewriting a program so that it can be analyzed by static analysis requires expertise on the underlying technique, so it can be difficult for any non-expert users. Next, I will describe the optimization-based data-driven analysis, which is the dominant approach in the existing literature of data-driven analysis. Examples of prior works that use optimization include input-sensitive profiling by Kopa and his colleagues, algorithmic profiling by Zabranux and his colleagues, and Danaplex by Ishimwe and his colleagues. So here's the workflow. In the first step for data collection, we prepare a collection, a set of concrete inputs, V1 up to Vn, and then execute a program F on these inputs to record the input sizes and costs, C1 up to Cn. We then aggregate these pairs of input sizes and costs into a dataset. In the second step, we optimize a cost bound, which is represented by the red line in the diagram on the right. Specifically, we minimize the distance between the red line and the black dots, which denote the observed costs in the dataset, subject to the constraint that the red line must lie above all the black dots. So this is how we use optimization to infer a cost bound from a dataset of observed costs. A disadvantage of this optimization-based technique is that it doesn't incorporate the user's domain knowledge about how large the gap should be between the black dots and the blue line in the diagram, which represents a true worst-case cost and can be strictly higher than the red line, which is the result of optimization. Also, optimization provides no quantitative measure of statistical uncertainty of inferred bounds. To improve on this optimization-based technique, in this work, we propose Bayesian data-driven analysis, where we perform Bayesian inference instead of optimization. Here's the workflow. In the first step, we define a probabilistic model, pi, of theta and d, which defines a joint probability distribution of two random variables, theta and d. Here, theta is a latent parameter. It is something that we want to infer, so it corresponds to a cost bound in the context of resource analysis. And d is an observed data, so it is a data set of cost measurements. Next, we collect observed data, the obs, and compute the posterior distribution given by Bayes' rule. In practice, however, the exact posterior distribution is computationally intractable. So instead, we run a sampling algorithm to draw a collection of posterior samples, and we use them as an approximation of the true posterior distribution. An advantage of this Bayesian technique over the optimization-based technique is that we can incorporate the domain knowledge of the user in the form of a probabilistic model. Also, the posterior distribution returned by Bayesian inference captures statistical uncertainty of inferred bounds, unlike optimization. We propose two different techniques for Bayesian data-driven analysis. The first one is Bayesian inference of worst-case cost, or BaseWC for short, which is in the middle of the slide. And the second technique we propose is Bayesian inference of polynomial coefficients, or BaseBC for short. So I will next describe them in turn. In the first one, BaseWC, the first step is to define a probabilistic model, pi, of theta, Cmax, and C, where Cmax is a hidden worst-case cost, which is represented by the blue dots in the diagram. And C is the observed cost, denoted by the black dots. Next, we draw posterior samples of Cmax, namely the blue dots, and then optimize the cost bound indicated by the red line, just like we did in the optimization-based technique. But this time, we have a constraint that the red line must lie above all the blue dots that we just inferred from step 2, instead of the black dots. So by performing Bayesian inference on the blue dots using the dataset of black dots, and then optimize the red line so that it lies above all the blue dots, the user can add an additional buffer between the black dots and the red line. The second technique we propose is BaseBC, where we define a probabilistic model, pi of P and C in the first step, where P is a polynomial coefficient of a cost bound, which is represented by a blue line in the diagram, and C is the observed cost. So that corresponds to the black dots. And then we draw posterior samples of a cost bound P. So this is basically a Bayesian polynomial regression where we perform Bayesian inference to infer not only the worst case cost, but also the polynomial coefficients of a cost bound. So next, I will describe our central and second contribution, hybrid resource analysis, followed by its evaluation. To design hybrid resource analysis, we need an interface between Bayesian data-driven analysis, which runs a sampling algorithm and draws posterior samples, and static analysis, which solves constraints to infer a sound cost bound. So a key challenge is, how do we coherently combine constraints and posterior samples? If we naively perform Bayesian data-driven analysis independently of the static analysis, then the posterior samples returned by Bayesian inference may not satisfy the constraints of the static analysis. So it is important to account for the constraints of the static analysis when we perform Bayesian data-driven analysis. In this work, we design, implement, and evaluate Hybrid AARA, which integrates Bayesian data-driven analysis, specifically BaseWC and BaseBC, and automatic amortized resource analysis, or AARA for short, which is a type-based resource analysis technique. We achieve this integration by a novel interface between sampling algorithms and linear programming, where sampling algorithms are for Bayesian inference and linear programming is for AARA. In Hybrid AARA, the user specifies which code fragment should be analyzed by which method. So Hybrid AARA covers a full spectrum, ranging from fully static analysis to fully data-driven analysis. On the left end of the spectrum is AARA, where the user chooses to analyze entire source code by static analysis. On the left end of the spectrum is base WC and base BC, where the user chooses to analyze entire source code by data-driven analysis. In practice, it is common that static analysis fails to analyze entire source code, but can still handle a non-trivial portion of the code. In such a case, the user can choose to perform static analysis on the part of the source code that it can handle, and data-driven analysis on the rest of the source code, such as the helper function G on the slide, which we assume cannot be analyzed by ARA. So this hybrid of the two analyses lies somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. And as we will show later in our evaluation, this hybrid performs better than static analysis alone or data-driven analysis alone. We choose to focus on ARA for the static analysis part of hybrid ARA. The key idea of ARA is that each variable is equipped with a polynomial potential function from amortized analysis of algorithms and data structures. ARA infers polynomial coefficients of these potential functions by solving linear programs. We chose ARA for the static analysis part of hybrid resource analysis for several reasons, including compositionality offered by types, automatic bound inference by LP solving, precise cost bounds by amortized analysis, soundness guarantee, and cost bound certificates in the form of type derivations. So we propose two different architectures for hybrid ARA, depending on whether we integrate ARA and base WC or ARA and base BC. In the first architecture, which integrates ARA and base WC, a key idea is to combine the linear constraints of ARA and base WC. So here's the workflow. Suppose the user annotates a code fragment E, which is color highlighted on the slide on the left, with the annotation stat to indicate that we perform statistical analysis on this code fragment. So statistical is what the annotation stat stands for. In the first step of this hybrid ARA, we collect runtime data D by recording the input sizes and cost of this annotated code fragment E. And then we draw posterior samples Cj max by performing Bayesian inference. And these posterior samples Cj max correspond to the blue dots in the diagram above. And then we aggregate the linear constraints from ARA on the part of the code where we perform static analysis, and also the linear constraints from base WC, specifically the constraint that each red line in the diagram must lie above all the blue dots. So we combine these two sources of linear constraints into a single linear program, and then we solve it using an off-the-shelf LP solver. In the second architecture, which integrates ARA and base BC, a key idea for designing an interface between sampling algorithms and linear programming is to run reflective Hamiltonian Monte Carlo, which is a recently developed sampling algorithm that draws samples from a probability distribution restricted to a bounded convex polytope. So here's the workflow. In the first step, we collect linear constraint C0 from ARA on the part of the code that's designated for static analysis. At the same time, we collect runtime data D by recording the input sizes and costs of this annotated code fragment E. We then run reflective HMC, which draws samples from a probability distribution restricted to a convex polytope. And this convex polytope is a feasible region of the linear constraint C0. Also, the posterior samples we draw in this step are the typing judgments that encode the polynomial coefficients of potential functions. And then in the last step, we substitute these typing judgments that we drew in step 3 into the linear constraints C0. And then we solve the resulting linear program. In the last step, we don't need to worry about the possibility of the posterior samples breaking the constraint C0, because in step 3, when we run the sampling algorithm, we draw samples from the feasible region of C0. So any sample we draw is guaranteed to already satisfy the constraint C0. Next, let me show the example evaluation of hybrid ARA using the benchmark of quicksort. Our resource metric of interest is the cost of comparisons, each of which varies between 0.5 and 1.0. Here we plot 6 posterior distributions. The first row is for data-driven analysis. The second row is for hybrid analysis of quicksort, where we perform data-driven analysis on the partition function, which is used inside quicksort, and static analysis on the rest. The first column is for opt, the second column is for base WC, and the last column is for base BC. In each plot, the red line indicates a ground truth cost bound. So that's what we aim for in resource analysis. The black dots are the observed costs in the dataset, and the solid blue line is the median cost bound in posterior distributions. And the light blue shade is the 10th to 90th percentile range of the posterior distributions of inferred bounds. If we compare these plots horizontally, then we see that Bayesian analysis is more accurate than the optimization-based technique, because the posterior distributions of the two Bayesian techniques are closer to the ground truth, namely the red line, than the cost bounds inferred on the first column, namely optimization. Also, if we compare the plots vertically, then we see that hybrid analysis is more accurate than data-driven analysis. For the full evaluation of hybrid AARA, we have curated 10 benchmarks, all of which cannot be handled by conventional AARA. This is a table from the paper showing the percentages of sound cost bounds from posterior distributions. If we compare the soundness proportions between Bayesian techniques, which we propose for this work, and the optimization-based technique, then one finding we can make is that base WC and base BC have higher proportions of sound bounds than opt, which is optimization. Also, if we compare hybrid analysis and data-driven analysis, then we see that hybrid base BC and base BC, hybrid base WC and base BC have higher proportions of sound bounds than the data-driven counterparts, namely data-driven base WC and base BC. So in conclusion, we have two takeaways. The first one is that Bayesian resource analysis, which is our first contribution, is more robust than the optimization-based technique, which is a dominant approach in the existing literature. Also, the second takeaway is that we designed hybrid resource analysis by integrating static analysis, specifically AARA and Bayesian data-driven analysis. And we have empirically shown that hybrid resource analysis is more accurate and robust than data-driven analysis. And also, it mitigates the incompleteness of static analysis. We have further details available in the paper, including type-based formulation of hybrid AARA, 2 soundness theorems of hybrid AARA, and full experiment results. Thank you.
Questions?
Hello. Yes.
Thank you for the talk. Have you measured, or can you, do you have an intuitive idea of what the overhead of annotating this is? And sort of beyond that, if there's a way to automatically pick which approach to use for which part of the code instead of having the user have to decide that?
Right. So in this work, we assume that the annotation is already given by the user, because the user may have their own domain knowledge to figure out maybe which part of the code should be analyzed by data-driven or static analysis. For example, maybe you have a part of the code that has a logarithmic cost bound, which cannot be analyzed by AARA, because AARA only supports polynomial cost bounds. So in that case, maybe it's better to ask the user to use their domain knowledge to provide the annotation. But regarding automation, it's possible to automate it because, for example, we can search the, so we can traverse the source code and then see whether any part of the code can be analyzed statically using AARA. And then if that fails, then we can gradually expand the scope of the code that's supposed to be analyzed by data-driven analysis. So certainly it's possible to automate it.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question. Oh, sorry, Evan. Yeah, Aditya, go ahead. I just have a very basic question. So
sure.
Are these bounds supposed to be tight? So should there be an input that actually exercises that worst case behavior?
No, the goal is not to infer a tight bound, but the goal is to infer a sound worst case bound.
So when you use this data-driven techniques, do you get soundness? Or
soundness, you said?
Like,
no.
Is it actually a worst case bound? Or?
So that's a limitation of data-driven analysis. So we don't, if we use data-driven analysis, then it's impossible to provide a soundness guarantee.
Right. Or this hybrid. So I guess I was wondering in the context of those applications, can you actually use this technique for any of those like security, WSET?
Maybe not for security. So sure. So it depends on the application domain. If the user wants 100% soundness, then hybrid analysis may not be suitable. But for example, in cloud computing, where the cloud service provider just wants an accurate estimate, which doesn't have to be sound, then I think this is a suitable application of hybrid analysis. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again.